Hi everyone, I'm V. Srinivas Rao, also known as VSR. I'm the Chairman and Managing Director for BT and BT and also consulting editor for Technos Media. I also chair Open Digital Innovation under Institution of Engineering and Technologies, Future Tech Panel India. Today, we are going to have a very interesting discussion. Everybody knows that now data is growing like anything, exponential growth, right? So without having a proper operating model for this data, structured, unstructured, or semi-structured, or high velocity, high volume data, and also for the analytics, a great operating model is required. So I have with me eminent speakers today, joined as panelists. I would like to introduce them. Bengal is a CIO, J Tire and Industry. I welcome Sharat. Then I have Kushru M. Misri, CIO and Senior Vice President, Eureka Forbes. Then I have Vishal Narula, Managing Director, Alvarez and Marcel. Then Siddesh Naik, Country Leader, Data, AI and Automation Technology, IBM India, South Asia. So with that note, now we will have some interesting discussion. I welcome all the panel members. So let me start now. I'm sure in the last, I think, 1 decade, we have been talking, 7, 8 years back also, I remember, we are only leveraging 10% or 15% of the structured data. We all started career, maybe, I'm not sure, some people might have started recently, but we all started with RDBMS, and then the complete transactional structural data. It was just 10 to 15%. But what happens to this unstructured data, the website content, PPTs, documents, right? And semi-structured data, which probably today coming in social media or telephone records or machine data, so on and so forth. When this data is growing exponentially, the data governance is getting changed and the policies are getting changed. The structural element is changing, new roles, new responsibilities have to be introduced. That's called, in simply nutshell, operating model, right? So today, I would like to start with my first question to Sharath and also Kushruji. Why this data has become that important? Somebody say it is gold mine, somebody say it is oil, and we can say whatever. The importance is basically gone up, right? So why the data importance has gone up today? Could you please share your thoughts? Probably start with the Sharath.
Yeah, thank you for having me, VSR, and all the esteemed panel members. So I'll go back in history about 10, 12 years back, when I would name the customer, we were doing a SAP implementation for them. So what happened? So for as a part of cutoff strategy, they were supposed to reconcile the debtors. And voila, when they reconciled, they found so much value hidden there that the SAP implementation became free for them.
Wow. Okay.
So which was being overlooked. So data always has a value. You call it, I treat it as a leading path to success, to a gold mine, or whatever you call it, new oil, whatever new. But data has got an intrinsic as well as extrinsic value, which can give you so meaningful insights that were not, you might not have even thought of. You can, if I talk of a manufacturing perspective, analyzing data properly and building a model accordingly, you can find the coveted golden batch.
Right.
If you look at the interaction part from a customer perspective, you can find the touch points and the way that data points will lead you, which are better for customer to interact with. Means you just touch upon any point, you go to the financial markets. Today, people have started sort of projecting the tentative traded values for a share. So these are all some of the examples. So I'll just leave at that and let Kushruji answer the important points from his side. Thank you.
Yeah, so please, Kushruji. So why this is something now 10% to, it has gone to now 100% or 90% data leverage is possible. So why that importance of data has gone up? What is the trigger point for that?
I think the basic trigger point, and more so during the COVID pandemic era, is I think it's all about the customer. It's customer experience, customer centricity. And I think that has triggered a variety of models, also, I would say issues also relating to data. The data allows the visualization of the relationship between the customer and your organization, right?
Right.
The analytics of this data provides the company to make an informed decision, okay? Whether an informed decision is right or wrong is still a matter of debate. But if it's wrong, you can quickly course correct. Okay, so it gives you that, and that's why the data, the elements of the data is so important. It helps you understand the customer, their imperatives, their needs,
Right.
and reveals what I call as the hyper-personalized way a company needs to deal with the customer to provide lifetime value for the customer. Well, if you utilize this data for forecasting correctly, it gives you the much needed imperatives to generate and drive innovation of products and services. And when this particular data is used in real-time decisioning, it drives consumer insight, enhancing the customer experience. So to a large extent, in retrospect, the consumer propagates the data, harness it correctly, and that will drive your company's growth. That's what
Okay,
I'm
great. Excellent. I think you always put, of course, the customer as a focal point. So the customer needs, the customer wants, could be nice to have and must have, all those things, and forecasting leading to innovations. All those things, I think, really helps. Like Sharad also mentioned, the values are already there. It's only unlock that hidden value. I think that's the most critical thing. Probably today we have more instruments, more technologies, and opportunity to unlock that value. So let me now ask Vishal, if you look at an organization, there are different roles. And today, especially in this fourth revolution, we got Chief Digital Officer, Chief Security Officer, Chief Operating Officer, of course, at the time, or he or she, Chief Data Officer. Different roles are there. What do you think we get us? As per this, the organization has been looking, okay, I want to get some value. Okay, I want to grow. That's probably the Chief Sales Officer. I want to brand, maybe the marketing officer. I want to have operational excellence, profitability, costing. I want to introduce extra officer or R&D head, right? So, share few of your thoughts on data will help different roles to gain the value, whatever Kushruji.
So if I kind of summarize the question, you're saying how does data help in different roles, right? It's just some break. Okay. So let me give you I think a larger audience here is mostly people who deal with data. We deal with data as well, but we deal with data for helping organizations prevent losses, save costs, or prevent frauds, or overall risk management to prevent crisis, data-driven crisis prevention in that sense. And I can tell you, in the RDBMS days, and I even if you think I look young, I'm not that young actually. I know the RDBMS days. I can tell you, even in those days, data always existed. It just existed in different ways. It was not as digital as it is today. So for example, consumer-facing companies and fast-moving consumer goods companies used to gather loads of data. It was just collected in different ways. It's very easy to collect that data because of the different touch points and digital footprints that exist out there today. But the same digital footprints help organizations understand their overall risk profile as well. So for example, I do a lot of work on fintech these days, based out of Bangalore. I'm exposed to a lot of fintech companies. While fintech companies are riding a wave because the adoption of digitization in payments is so high, they are also at the same time grappling to curb losses, because there's such innovative ways, and sometimes it's just systems cannot probably handle volumes, and there can be ways in which losses could happen, frauds could happen unknowingly, and at times they can become serious issues. They can also become national security issues, if not handled properly. The only way an organization can build trust with the consumer to say that you are protected when you're dealing with us in a digital way is to understand from data where the organization is vulnerable. It's a very different application of using data and analytics in an operating model, as different from say a sales or a customer experience. But in the end, no matter how good a customer experience someone has, one particular bad news out in the media about a company, that too something that is driven through technology, can completely take away the trust of an organization. And then it takes, and all of us know very well, once that erodes, no matter what you do, it's very difficult to bounce back to the same level of profitabilities and revenues and customer base and subscriptions over a period of time. So I think the adoption of data from different roles would be very different, and what we see is that it is helping organizations protect itself, manage risk, prevent crisis and losses.
I think excellent. I think you brought out very important point. It's not like just having the data, and the data helps you to find the vulnerabilities, and data itself should not become vulnerable. That's also another access sitting somewhere. Very good. So, Siddesh, I want to share one of the examples of when I was working in previous companies. CAO met me and told, VSR, there is complete noise in social media. In social media, the sales is positive, but my sales have not gone up. Okay. So it's all crap. That's the word he used. Sorry for my language. Okay. So what you think then, how you make sure that the real value from the data is derived? It's not like there is no correlation, right? At the end of the day, there is a correlation. Okay. The data has to provide the value, right? So any experience in terms of how this data, need not be social media, any data coming in, like Vishal mentioned about we have to find the vulnerabilities, even data helps you find the vulnerability. So like that, any experiences you want to share where the data has really added a value? Any industry it is?
Absolutely. Thank you, VSR, and it's indeed a pleasure to interact with the esteemed panel today afternoon. Let me get to an example of a large general insurance company that we worked with pretty recently. Like Khushru and Sharad very beautifully put it, the importance of data is around elements of customer experience, customer centricity, or operational excellence. And Vishal brought in a very important point around operational risk, the elements of governance, risk, compliance elements that become the underlying, if you may call it, a hygiene factor for the entire business to run. Now, let's go to this example of this general insurance company where so this is we built a model for them, which is a damage assessment model. It was a AI model. So when you on your mobile app, when you look at a damaged part of a car, so if it's a left rear fender, when you look at that image, you are able to one is figure out which car. So if it's a Honda City, you're able to figure out it's a Honda City and the part as it appears in the parts catalog of the company.
Okay.
Now, for us to build that model, we needed to use a massive amount of data that the company had, and it was in the form of photographs kept in tons and tons of files. Our effort started with digitizing that data, and then actually building a model that could recognize the damage.
That's the car, exact car. So there is no cheating there. Yeah. And there is no need to visit there, right? The insurance people need not visit there.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what they did.
Right.
So you are not only able to identify that car, the damaged part as it appears on the parts catalog, pick up the extent of damage, categorize it into various categories, the labor associated with it. If there is a parts replacement, the parts cost that goes with it. In fraction of a minute, you're able to give the claim amount. And what the company did was, about 8 months back, they went and announced a campaign where they said, claims lesser than this amount, you don't need an assessor, a surveyor. It will be credited to you then and there. You can go to any workshop of your choice and go do it. And this is a classic example of how you're bringing in customer experience, customer centricity by using tons of data that you've had for years, but you are now putting it to use by bringing in experience which really takes customer delight to the next level. So
right. I think that's a great example. I mean, the headaches to the customer gone. I mean, okay, you have to call them or you have to mail them. Somebody have to come verify. All gone, right? I mean, with that simple, your artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithm is giving data. Yes, this is the car. Yes, this is the damage, and even it might estimate also probably.
Yeah, it gives you the estimate because every part has an associated labor, and you put it into broad categories. Of course, it was a tough initial.
Tiny.
It's more a cultural acceptance of am I covered when this happens? So the next piece, when we deployed this, the next discussion came in is, how do I detect fraud? The point that Vishal brought in, what happens to damages that exist already? So we then put in elements that could capture those elements as well. Things which are already there gets captured and registered against the user, and then you build on top of that. So it's something that the client as well as us have evolved together as the model. Now that model has been launched for commercial vehicles as well. It was initially launched only for passenger cars. It's got launched for commercial vehicles as well.
I think the most important point you raised here is the client and you work together. I think especially for this data analytics related, without the client role, I think all just becomes only, it's an effort, but not the value, right? I think that's a very important point you raised. So thank you so much, Siddesh. Kushru, have you observed any change in the life cycle of the data management? I mean, last many years, 50, 60 years, we have been talking about data. Okay. So have you observed any change? Because we are talking about high volume, high velocity, veracity, different things are there, and structured, unstructured, semi-structured, different sources, and cloud. This is multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, on-premise. So much of jargon is there. So did you observe any change in the life cycle management of this data?
Yes. In fact, I think with the rampant utilization of social media and with the, I would say, afraid to say, with the consumer non-compliant towards the data privacy. Okay. When they see an accept, they accept it without reading even the first line about it. Data proliferation has become, the velocity, the veracity, whatever you call it, has jumped from I would say terabytes to petabytes and above. Okay. So yeah, the data has gone from, the data is there, frankly, but the volume of data and the silos of data have increased tremendously. So you could be utilizing data from one section, and then there comes the tools. So the tools of reviewing the data has also become tremendously high. So you could be spinning the same data over and over and over and over again. But the insights coming out sometimes are becoming poorer and poorer. So I think the entire strategy of data and its modeling on the analytics is becoming, I would say, the most important thing, because you could have petabytes of data, but if you don't know how to spin the data into your own insights, which have to come out, I think all of that data is, well, it's considered as dark data.
Right. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. So that's where I think in one of the, it's almost 5-6 years back, I was in panel discussion. Somebody told drip, data rich, insight poor. Okay, we can't have that drip. So Sharad, do you have any comments on the changes in the way data being managed in the last 4 years because of these so many technological innovations, whether big data, structured, unstructured, semi-structured, different sources are coming in. So any changes you observed in the way the data is being managed, the life cycle, the phases?
So you called out a very interesting acronym, DRIP, data rich, insight poor. So this has been happening over the times, and means it's necessarily not related to the different tools. Probably human brain is the brightest of the tool which is available, and you will find people, you will find colleagues who have got a knack for analyzing data at the go. So, but that knack, if that can be converted into a methodology, a process by which we can get richer insights, that becomes very helpful. So, as you were earlier commenting on Siddesh, that they were working mutually with the client, means the knowledge of SME is very, very important. And in data lifecycle management, though this term is not relatively new, so earlier we used to just two type of data, current data and archive data. But now concepts of warm data, cold data, hot data, they have come into existence. And bringing any data from being cold to the hot is at snap of a finger. So the methodologies of in the data lifecycle are changing. And similarly, what happens for data specifically that would relate to analyzing some frauds? So if we might need data which is probably decades old. So if that is available to us, so we need to keep the data appropriately and know how to sort of retrieve it. That would be very important. And another thing, one of my ex-bosses used to say, I need not remember every data point, but I shall only know where to keep it. So I shall only know where I can find it. So I'm just keeping that analogy from a data analysis perspective also.
Right.
If we know what are my KPIs and from where I can get them. So keeping data meticulously in a position, in a vault, of wherever I can access it as and when required is the new mantra. Thank you.
Right. Sure, Charanand. I think very well articulated. So I think if you look at, we used to talk about data marts or data warehouses, then data lakes, somebody said, then data fabrics or data mesh, then so much coming in. Certainly all these things means, I don't think we have time to discuss all those. They change life cycle, and there are so many new technological innovations are there. So that means at the end of the day, when I have the data, I always believe it has to answer the questions like, what happened in the past? Why it happened? That is a diagnosis or a root cause analysis. What will happen? I should be able to predict and see whether my customer is going to leave or whether my machine is going to probably break down, whatever it is. Okay, then if it happens, what recommendations the system can give? That's where I think the prescriptive analytics is there. And finally, the nirvana stage is nearly autonomous. Okay, if it happens, it itself applies something and then take the action. Okay, that's where I think the whole data, descriptive analytics, diagnostic analytics, or prescriptive, predictive, prescriptive, autonomous analytics, all these things are there. New technology innovations are there. So, Vishal, can you share with all these new challenges, new opportunities, and new trends, why the importance of operating model managing this data has gone up? We used to have some operating models, but now we are basically making it a very structured and very explicitly mentioning you must have a data operating model or something like that. Maybe in the past we used to say IT governance, under that everything comes.
Very simple. I think if we are moving towards digitizing businesses, we can't afford to have data that cannot be retrieved as and when we want. Like Sharad put it, it's not important to know all data points, but what is really important is to know what can I get out of it whenever I want and how do I do it. That's about it. And because everything now in business is getting digitized, and the number of data points will very soon be infinite. And I'm sure that if you put enough time and effort, you can capture all possible data points and leave one bucket where you can't capture anything as unstructured, and you leave it there, because maybe you cannot capture all of that at all. But even in that unstructured format, all data is still extremely important. Now, the reason it is important is because we have now started making decisions basis the data. So I think the days where experience and trust used to be more important than just data is obviously past. I think I'm just stating the obvious there. What is really important to know is that even with experience, one would want to make sure that one is relying back to see, is there any data point that vets my experience and what I would like to take a decision for in the future. And like, for example, very simply now, you go on most of the consumer websites and you have chatbots. How do you think most companies who want to make sure customers are happy with their service are understanding where is it that we need to dedicate more resources on customer service? They know that because all chatbots are able to either solve some problems or not solve some problems. When they're not able to solve problems, they know that we need to dedicate more resources, understand the root cause, right? It is not possible to come to this in a smaller time, and I can't even say how small. It has to be as good as real time if you do not have data governance in place. So data governance very simply means whether you have a lake or a mesh or whatever, you need to be able to retrieve and query it and get results in formats which are visual enough for you to be able to perceive the problem and the solution very, very quickly. I think that is the limited amount of human intelligence that should be required for decision making going forward. And if I just correlate this to the domain where we function mostly in terms of risk, is that most finance and risk departments in an organization would be looking at dashboards, sometimes to identify, are there any so-called red flags that they need to look at from a transactions perspective. But if they have to make a decision on how do you resolve the red flags, they will have to go back to the specifics in those red flags, which will again come back to querying. And if it is all in unstructured, they would not say, if it's in unstructured, there's not much we can do about it. I think the whole mindset of finance professionals have changed and said, put in a tool that structures that unstructured data and gives me the answer. And I'll just quickly summarize with one simple example. We've now very recently launched something called Relativity One. We're the first ones to launch Relativity One in India. All it does, it just goes through all of the electronic data, whether you have it in PPTs or in spreadsheets or in chats or in emails, or in PDFs or in technical documents, and use these keywords to identify all those documents that would be relevant. And you can create rules out of it. Now, all of that is in existence simply because it is required to have unstructured data queryable, because you cannot leave that, and you can't structure unstructured data overnight. You'll have to engage into larger projects to be able to capture data so that it's not unstructured in storage going forward. But what do you do now? You use tools that are able to look through unstructured data and give you insights. So the need for their data operating models is because we cannot afford to leave data unstructured in the future, because our decisions are based on that, and everything else, the whole viability of the business will eventually depend on it.
So I think you emphasized a very important point that without the operating model, I mean, you probably may not be in a position to unlock the true value from this data, which is again scattered. And you said it is there in Excel sheet, it is there electronic devices, it is there in chatbots and all. So there must be an operating model to leverage that and bring it some sort of a structure to manage that. You emphasized that point very well. Thanks, Vishal. Siddesh, I want to ask you, okay, I don't have operating model. And what does it mean? I mean, I don't care. I don't need operating model. All these are only jargons, and probably somebody says that We already have some data governance and all. Why this again, a new operating model name has come and all. So what is your thought on that? So can you differentiate data governance and operating model?
Sorry, what was the last part? Say that again.
Can you differentiate data governance and operating model? Is there any difference? Are there any additional components are there in the operating model?
So like, sure. Let me come to that. Like what Vishal spoke about, Khushru spoke about. The challenges you have today is about diverse data sources, structured, unstructured, different platforms, different formats, different platforms, and this multi-dimensional predicament gets even worse with on-premise, on cloud, on multiple public clouds. You're creating a massive multi-dimensional scenario, and your ability to and like what Khushru beautifully put it, you have data in silos across the organization, and how many times you're going to spin that, and how are you going to replicate all of that into one location, which becomes an enormous, if you would call it a data warehouse or a data mart or a data lake, whatever jargons we want to use there. But how do you really bring in and extract value out of this data is the element.
Right.
The way I would put it is the operating model is a model that lets you create a virtual fabric, if I may call it, right? And I don't want to use jargons here, but your ability to create a virtual tissue between data endpoints without physically moving that data. And that's an important point we are stressing on here, without physically moving that data. It needs to be, it is done by using elements of AI, elements of automation, elements of integration. An important element there is federated governance that gets enforced, and the whole aspect is it is something that is agnostic to platforms. You could have data sitting on Unix environments. You could have data sitting on a S3 platform on the cloud. It has got to be agnostic to platforms, and it should facilitate the use of data as an enterprise asset.
Okay.
Now that is what the operating model is all about. So
sure.
Back to your question, is governance? Yes, governance is one of the key elements, but it is not the only element. There are other elements that go in.
Okay.
So if I would put it, it actually encompasses all elements of data, right from the collect, organize, collect and discovery, to organize, which is the governance elements, to analyze, which is your building your AI models, your model ops that you do in terms of how do I build AI at scale, how do I bring in the tool sets for a larger portion of my organization, a lot more employees who can now use AI and now use the analytics that we're trying to put forth. And the last element, which is also as important an element, is how do I operationalize this AI? How do I infuse this into more and more elements of my business? So I would say there are these 4 elements of the AI ladder that go in, and governance is one of the most critical elements.
Yes. Yeah. So I want to extend that, Khushru. Now I think, again, operating model we are talking about, there is an AI ops where it is completely trying to automate the IT operations, where you use ML and AI. Again, it is a data, but of course you might take the data from the applications and infrastructure logs and all. And there is ML ops, Siddesh mentioned, model ops and all. So how these things will become a part and parcel of the data model, I mean, the operating model of the data. And can you give some anatomy of this operating model for data in your own view? Maybe food for thought. And even I request Siddesh also can. So what is the anatomy of this data operating model? So like human organs, we have human anatomy, human organs. So
VSR, let me say that this is our experience, okay, where I would say one part of the anatomy of this has got to be your cloud strategy. Okay. Otherwise, if you are on-prem, you may face certain amount of constraints. And this is coming out of, I would say, the experience behind the way we have done it. Okay. And we adopted the cloud strategy. So that was one part of the anatomy. The other part was centralize your strategy, governance, and your technology. Do not let data be allowed to be in the siloed part of it. Okay. Centralize the sources of your data. Okay. Whether it's a data lake or a data warehouse, you need to centralize your sources of data. More importantly, after you do all of this, the governance part of it comes in, which is stringently monitor the data proliferation. Otherwise, the newer age analytical tools will keep spinning the same old data, giving you poorer and poorer insights. As you mentioned about, data rich, insight poor. So you need to be very clear about this. The other point which is important, which is again the anatomy of all of this, is optimize your analytical talents and use advanced cloud models like analytics as a service to keep your cost in check. Otherwise, this is an area where cost can escalate, and before you know, there's a big bill which comes and lands on your desk.
Right.
And encompass around that a complete security bubble around your data in motion and your data address.
Right.
Okay. And I think the most important part is make sure your change management strategy is for your people, to wean them away from thinking that the data output which comes in is just another report. It is not. Okay. Make sure that you showcase the data as part of the visualization to real-time dashboards. So if you look at these 4 or 5 points, that forms the anatomy of your operating model.
I think to put it, you said, I think the cloud is an important element, and then centralization is another element. So if I put it probably at an abstract level, you need to have policies, which has to be automated and implemented. You need to have the processes. You need to have training and skills for the new ways of this data management, and also best utilizing that, and also developing few things on the top of that and all. And most importantly, you said operational expenses reduction is the most critical thing, where you can use as a service rather capital expenditure. That should also part of the operating model. I think in summary, I think that's what I think you mentioned. If I'm wrong, if I'm not wrong. Okay, great. Sharath, do you have any comments on that? So end of the day, any operations, I look at cost reduction, my comfort, my convenience, ease of getting the services what I want, right? All those things. Any operations, it's not just only the operations relating to the data. So do you have any thoughts on that? What are all the things needs to be added in the operating model for managing the data?
Just 2 things. Means one is everybody is talking about a polyglot platform. Means whether the service which Kushbuji mentioned is available in language A, database B, or OSC, I shall be able to consume them seamlessly on the same platform. So that's one important thing. And another thing is extension of what Kushbuji said. Before moving to development of models in the AI or ML journey, we shall first of all recognize the problem that we are going to solve. We shall not try to shoot for the moon, and there shall be specified use cases that shall be shortlisted, and the effective value that can be gained out of them, and then the subsequent journey shall be budgeted. So those are the 2 things that I'd like to. Thank you.
I think it's not just relating to data. 70% of the digital initiatives, are not successful today. I'm not talking about only the data. So one of the main reasons could be not identifying right problems, or designing wrong solution, or identifying a wrong initiative, whatever. There might be so many reasons for that. I think in the operations, I think as you rightly said, you have many problems are there, but prioritizing and trying to address what is the right problem to give the better value is a very critical element. It's not just only quarterly you do and all, it is a day-to-day issue to be handled. Yeah. So that's great, actually. So Siddesh, I have one question for you, because you are representing a product company, of course, also services, but I come from services companies. So do you have any standards or some sort of frameworks released by any global bodies, professional bodies or anything, on setting up these new age digital operating models? Or any tools are there? You are from IBM, there might be some tools, right, to make it more automated. Today, I don't want anything to be too much of human interventions, right? I want to have automation. To how to automate this complete operating model? Are there any global standards available?
Yes, answer is the industry is evolving to some standards in that direction. Data fabric is one example of how that evolution is happening. The typical approach used to be, I all that data that I need, I bring it to one location, I replicate it all to one location, create a massive data warehouse, and then start extracting value out of that data. Two challenges. One is the cost elements that go with it. The second is the time element that goes with it as well. Nobody has the time to go through that long cycle of. Most clients today have started taking a mixed approach. Your ability to have some of the most queried systems onto a data warehouse, the rest of the elements are on something called as a data fabric. And data fabric is like a virtualization layer for data, where you are extracting without physically moving that data. You are able to query that data in an absolute automated manner. You have elements like auto SQL that comes in. So you are not even bothered about the user. The user need not even know where that data set is sitting. All he does is a query, which becomes a universal query across the organization. It's like an enterprise asset of data with all its federated governance and policies that are enforced as a. And let me give you an example of how this is actually getting deployed. And this is a paint giant.
It's like realizing your a dream operating model using data fabric. That's where probably you're trying to. I mean, if I want to really put it a very sophisticated data operating model, data fabric and the corresponding tools play a vital role.
Absolutely. And let me give you a live example. We're working with a bank where they have a Sybase IQ data warehouse, and they have two of their largest systems where almost 50-60% of the querying happens on that this thing. But they have 20 other environments, siloed environments, where there are ad hoc queries that keep coming. One option is I bring all of these onto a massive monolithic data warehouse, which will have humongous cost implications, time implications. The success factor also becomes a big question mark as you get. So how do I have an element where I do a combination of both? The high query elements remain on a data warehouse, but the rest of the elements come on a data fabric where I don't physically move data, but at the same time, I'm able to bring in all elements of automation, all elements of governance. At the same time, bring in the overall intelligence that I need out of that data across the organization. Breaking those silos is what has become the name of the game. And
Excellent.
To your question, it is evolving as we talk. It's the standards are coming in. People are so it's not that one solution fits all is the name of the game. It is how do I make it most optimized for your kind of needs. For a mid-size organization, a complete data fabric without an EDW may do the job. You don't need to, and you go live in a matter of few weeks, you're not even talking months here, in a matter of maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you have the ability to, and we've done it for a cement company as we talk. We've deployed a data fabric in a matter of 3 weeks, and without a complete data warehouse requirement at all. Initially, we went in through a lot of apprehensions. Can I get my production environments connected on a data fabric? What does it mean? What is the production implication? How do I size it? All of those. But now, as we go live, they are thrilled about something that as complex as this, which they would have envisaged months and months to go live.
Brilliant.
So that's how the whole paradigm is changing at this point in time. But again, as I said, it's not a be all end all. There are organizations which need a combination of both. So how do we find the right fit becomes extremely important for us to go find.
Sure. Thank you, Siddhesh. I think it is so wonderful. So I think what is most important, the key messages from our discussion is that one, we have to understand the environment, like you also mentioned, small, big, and the data sources. I mean, like we say, velocity, veracity, volume, variety, and all. I think baseline needs to be done. Then operating model needs to be designed. Then look at what is the business case for that operating model to be realized using whatever the automation tools you talk about, whether data fabric or any other things. And that clarity, I think we need to bring along with that some of the very important first proof of concept use cases to make sure that whatever the design operating model works fine using these new latest and greatest technologies like you did it and proven to the customer, okay, you don't need to spend too much of the money and also you get a lot of value. I think that's what I think. So we basically discussed. Any other comments from Kushruji, Sharad, or Vishal, Siddhesh?
So one point, VSR, you briefly alluded to it, is on the AI ops side. AI ops has become a big area where AI has started getting infused. How do I optimize my environment? APM has been there for a while now. Kushruji alluded to it in terms of how do I control my cloud costs from skyrocketing? How do I keep those costs in control? So the whole AI ops story has evolved from the service desk or the APM to an application resource management aspect. Now, if you look at the cloud world today, most of the enterprises operate on something called as a reserved instance, and that reserved instance is significantly cheaper than the on-demand infrastructure that you get onto the cloud. Now, the whole application resource management is about real-time allocation of the resources. It is able to solve performance issues real time. If you need, your application needs memory, it's able to allocate memory to that application, or assign cores to that application on the fly, real time, to address those issues. So not just the performance issues or the efficiency issues. What clients have started using application resource management is for how do I keep my cloud costs under control? How do I take a reserved instance, make sure I utilize that reserved instance to the fullest, or resize that reserved instance and minimize my on-demand purchases that I would make.
And that too, everything automatic. I mean, it's not like human interventions. Yeah, AI and ML has to suggest that. Recommendations have to be given. Absolutely. Yeah. That's great. I think, yeah. So that's so, I think, great, Siddhesh, Kushruji, Vishal, and Sharad. I think without data, we don't exist. So whatever the means it is, but how best we can unlock that power needs an excellent operating model. Doing anything ad hoc without any operating model doesn't give the power of data and value to the customers and other stakeholders. So thank you so much for joining this wonderful panel discussion and sharing your insights. Thank you.
For more updates from CXO TV, please like and subscribe to our channel.